I'm 47 and I'm in the same kind of 9-to-5 career I've been in for the last 20 odd years. So I want to share what insights and learnings I've picked up over the last 10 years, the last decade or so, that I feel might be helpful to people around my age, older, younger. I think it's always helpful to hear these things. That said, I don't think there's any substitute for living through it. I think everyone's got to go through it themselves and pick up these insights for themselves, because everyone's different. There's no one size fits all. You can watch my video. I think you can learn a few things from it and take a few things away that you choose to, but I don't think there's substitute for learning and going through it yourself. So I think I'll give you 4 or 5 things I've learned over the last years that I don't think I would have picked up in my mid-30s. So the first one is, being good at something can become part of what holds you there and part of the trap. So it feels good to be confident. It feels good to be competent, right? It feels good to have work be like second nature, know what you're doing, to be the person that people trust, etc. And I think it's a good feeling. But I think the past 10 to 20 years inside the jobs I've been in, the work doesn't really, what I've learned is the work doesn't change at the same pace as we do, or as I did. And what might have been a really good fit 10 or 15 years ago might not necessarily be a similarly good fit 10 or 15 years later. I think you learn to tolerate things, but you start to realize that maybe you haven't, or maybe the job hasn't grown at the same kind of pace as you are, and you want different things, and that's okay. I don't think the job itself is the trap. I think it's kind of the guilt of feeling like you have to be grateful to be working there when you maybe have outgrown where you are. And I say this very bluntly. You're a different person than the one that took the job, effectively, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. I think you know on some level that you have multiple facets to you. You can learn something new and start over, but I think when you've been in an industry for that long, you're not looking for something to redo. You're not looking to redo your life and your career. You're looking for kind of an off-ramp to something else. And I think that leads kind of into the second insight, which is you don't realize how much a job actually costs you until you're away from it. And what happens on a day-to-day basis with us in our jobs, and I know this has happened to me, is that you get so tied into the work and the day-to-day that you don't really have time to think about other things. You don't have time to look at your life and your career and where you are at that point in time from a kind of a higher level, looking down at yourself from outside. You just get stuck in the day-to-day, and so you realize this kind of thing when you start to step away. Maybe you go on vacation, you spend some time away from the job where you're not thinking about that, and you realize how much time you have to think and just how much you have to offer outside of your job. You start to come up with like new business ideas and etc. So I think what's been helpful for me previously is I decided to take a couple of sabbaticals, is what I call it, sometime early in my career, a few years ago, and it was really helpful in just being able to take some time off. And I know not everyone is privileged enough to be able to do this, but I think if you're able to get yourself in a position where you can take a few months off of your job and see what is out there and feel what you feel like you could be doing outside of work and what you might enjoy, and experiment with things. I think it's a really useful exercise. So what I feel like we are trying to do early on is just force ourselves through the day-to-day, and I think that's fine. It's a useful skill to have when you're starting out in your career. But what shows up later is that you don't complain, you just get on with things. That just teaches you to move on with things and get on with things and not complain about it. And that's, I won't say a problem later in life, but it's definitely a barrier to finding something that you might want to be doing outside of work. So, or to replace work for you. And I think that's a good thing to start to experiment with and experience, so that once you have these sort of thoughts, or start having these sort of thoughts, you can then start creating what your plan might be to move into the next thing. So I don't think you can eliminate like the stress from your life of the day to day, but you can stop assuming that that's just the cost of doing business. I think there's much more out there than just living in this day to day that we do a lot of the time. The next thing is, and I've got some notes here that I've written down because I probably would forget these things, but they call it golden handcuffs, right? It's kind of that stability of a decent salary, benefits, all these things that come along, and the lifestyle that allows you to live. And then you start to think, as you go later on in life, and you get into your 40s maybe, and your 50s, and you start to think, I just need to do this for 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 more years. And if I can do that, that's okay. I'll be at a place where I'm financially stable enough, and I'll be able to give this up and do what I want to do. But I think you assume that there are things you assume, right? You assume that you'll still be able to do it at that age. You assume you'll still be around at that age. You assume that just everything will be kind of the same as it is now, so that you're able to do those things. And that's not always the case. So life doesn't go according to your rules. You have to go according to life's rules. And so adaptation is very important when it comes to this. And I don't know how you, like, is there more stress to having what you have in this 9 to 5 day to day, not necessarily enjoying it, but you have what you need for your lifestyle? Or do you scale down your lifestyle and leave this existence and do something that's, fulfills you a little bit more, find what that is, but knowing that your lifestyle will need to downscale? There's a different stress that comes with both, but I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that and know it, so that you're able to, again, manage accordingly. The next thing is that I found that control of your time matters more than money, especially when, again, you get into your 40s or 50s or whatever it may be. Past a certain point, I think income stops buying more things, and I think I alluded to this a little earlier as well. But control of your time starts to mean more, and that's where I'm at right now. I think I want more control of my time. I don't want to be dictated to by meetings that happen on my calendar, by people dictating terms as to what I'm able and not able to do with my job. So I think when your ambition is to climb higher and higher, it does cost you those years of, your most energetic years. I think you're not getting any more energetic, you're probably getting less energetic as you go on in life. And that time doesn't come back. So you do want more control over that time and what you're able to do with that. And so again, building this system or these things that you can go into at a certain point of your life that, substitutes for your work and your income, the sooner you can start to think about that, the better. I think that's really it. I think there's a lot to digest when you think about how your life will be after you're going to be working. Like, what's next? What is going to happen when you retire, whenever that is? It's in your 60s or whenever, like most people do. What is next? What are you going to do? And what legacy you're going to leave? I think I started thinking about things like that more when my dad passed away earlier this year, and I went back home and said a few words at his funeral and just started to think what impact he had on people's lives and what impact I want to have on people's lives and what legacy I want to leave. And so it starts to make you think about things differently, because you start to feel that you're not going to really remember the deadline that you had at work, that you needed to get some creative in by so that it made the launch. You're not going to remember that kind of thing, but you are going to remember other things in your life. You're going to remember spending that time with your dad or your mom, or taking that vacation and seeing something you hadn't seen before in a different part of the world. Those are the type of things you really remember, and that's what control over your time gives you, because you're able to dictate those kinds of things. But it's not as simple as just quitting your job and doing those things. It's a very long process to get there. But I think if you don't start that process at some point, you just continue to go along with what you feel is normal and what society expects from you. And so I don't know if this would have landed for me when I was 37 or in my 30s. I think I am more introspective now and more self-reflective and self-aware in my 40s. I think you have to go through these things again. And so I think the important thing for me now is, how do I start building this off-ramp to what's next? What is that? Do I need to take some time off to, assess and determine that? Or do I need to have a plan so that when I do take the time off, I know exactly what I'm doing? I think that's the next phase for me. So, that's all I really have to say. I'd like to hear about anyone else who is kind of experiencing the same thing. Any things you didn't understand 10 years ago that you do understand a bit more now about your career, about yourself. I think that it helps me. It helps anyone else who's reading through the comments. So would appreciate your input. Thanks again for watching.